I was looking at this ALICE article here, and it's called Apollo 11 and the Slippery Slope, Inexplicable 30% Reduction in the Shadows of Apollo 11 EVA. Mary Bennett has derived this account from Russian reports relating to this event, and relevant references can be found in the end notes.
Mary Bennett has derived this account from Russian reports relating to this event. Now, one of the great advantages that ALICE has is they have a native Russian speaker that they can go to who can do the translations for them. So you've got the Russian academic and mathematician Mikhail Vlaskovich Korokov, the Astronomical Bulletin of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Now, that's quite a prestigious organization. We get on to the references at the end. Korobov article reads, the work is devoted to the mathematical analysis of photographs taken during the Apollo 11 EVA in the context of the new version, that's 2012, of the photogrammetric map of the extravehicular activity of astronauts and official data on the azimuth and height of the sun above the lunar horizon during the EVA. After taking into account photo distortions and surface irregularities, a significant 30% reduction in the shadow's lengths compared to the theoretical value was revealed. This 30% reduction is constant, with an error of plus or minus 1% across all the EVA pictures analyzed, despite the fact that the analysis was done on photographs of objects of different sizes and from different angles, taken at different times. To carry out this analysis, new, exact, not approximate, mathematical formulas for calculating the distortion of angles and proportion of lengths in photographs were established by the author. To demonstrate the accuracy and efficiency of these formulas in practical applications, many examples are provided using both the Apollo lunar photographic record and terrestrial photographs. He obviously goes into considerable detail here. The author is a mathematician, Master of Science in Mathematics with honours, State University in Russia, Doctor of Philosophy, the same university, Senior Research Fellow, Sobolev Institute of Mathematics, and Assistant Professor, Novosibirsk State University since 2002, Full Professor, School of Mathematics, Sciences, Fudan University, Shanghai, China. Achievements include research into stability of Lipschitz solutions to partially differential relations and geometric descriptions of the gradient ranges of differential mappings. Research into Lagrange mean value formula for vector-valued functions. This guy knows what he's talking about, hence why it's been highlighted in our list. And Mary Bennett, being a good writer, she wrote the book Dark Moon, as well as several other books David has worked with as well.
This is interesting. While seriously defending the Apollo missions, the presentation of this posting is written with a tongue-in-cheek. The strikeouts also exist in the Russian version and are not simply sloppy editing, but are meant to represent humor aimed at taunting the Apollo critics. But the BIS members, the BIS members, welcome anyone with an interest in space travel. And the inference here is that those who criticize Apollo do not necessarily have the scientific competence to do so. As for the forgers from NASA, this is a heavily handed way of alluding to themselves. Eric M. Jones and VP and their Apollo critics would see them.
I think they're saying that because you can measure their shadow lengths, right, from that you can calculate the height of the sun above the horizon, and the two don't appear to match.
The set designers were taking artistic license in setting up the lighting in there, and they put it much higher than what would have been had it been just from the sun. Of course, they'd be looking at to see how good the photography would be at that lighting angle, and they would have moved the lighting up to get a better image. But the actual data is claiming that the sun was much lower in the sky.
And because we know what time they are alleged to have landed, we can calculate the height of the sun above the horizon. Therefore, the shadow lengths can be calculated from that. And if they're 30% longer, it implies that the sun is apparently higher than the official record states.
Well, it's not just Apollo 11. That's throughout all of the missions. Apollo 17 is incredible. It's like vertical at one point.
You know, this is interesting. For pans 1, 2, 3, and 4, for all of the camera locations and orientations, they were calculated in the overall photogrammetric analysis. The pan 5 stations were determined in a separate analysis discussed in section 1.5 of the article. In each panorama, the station location of the stations is plotted as violet dot. A violet circle shows the characteristic distance of the stations from the pan's central point, and the dashed circles indicate mean squared deviations. Because of the large number of camera stations near the LM ladder, Pan 1 information has been moved to an empty area northeast of the limb. See also an animated comparison between the two original 1969 map and this version. The major differences are: 1. The locations of the LRRR and the PSEP and associated camera stations, which are farther south of the limb in the new map than in the original. Then it has 2 camera station locations near the Mesa Quad 4 on the northwest side of the limb, and 3, the detailed distribution of camera stations within each panorama are now available. That's where they got this information from, because it wasn't available before. That's interesting. As a matter of fact, it seems that the more NASA's putting out, the more new information that they're bringing to light and putting out into the media, the more they're getting busted.
It's interesting that the date of the original article, 2014, that is just a year or so after I had appeared at the British Interplanetary Society with my "It Didn't Happen" talk, which caused all manner of problems. Maybe this was somebody trying to confirm that what I was saying was correct, but doing it in a very technical way, which is a good way of doing it, because it then implies that A, he knows what he's talking about, he understands the mathematics, and because Mary Bennett was involved with my original talk, because I saw her before we did it, and David Percy, they both knew that I was going to be at the British Interplanetary Society talking about this. So we've got all this information coming out now. I'm not saying that I generated the interest in it, but it could have had something to do with it. Analyzing the Apollo 11 EVA photography. Now that map's been around for a while, showing the position that the photographs were taken from and their numbers. That's the Buzz Aldrin Man on the Moon photograph, 5903. You can see where that was taken from.
There's an example that could easily be measured for the degree angle off that one photograph I just sent there as a comparison just from the flag. He said it's off by 30 degrees.
Well, the angle there, you can actually measure the angle on that one, and I use it in one of my presentations to show the angle. I think it's about 35 degrees, that one.
Well, if they're claiming that the degree angle is off by 30, the height of that flag is about 8 feet off the ground. The shadow length on it's maybe 12 feet. It's in the 40 to 45 degree angle range,
which is a much higher angle.
Apollo 11, they started at 14 degrees and they ended at 15.4 degrees before they lifted off. But don't forget, they were only out there for 2.5 hours on the surface, so it wouldn't have changed very much. So if they started at 14 degrees and they're only out there for 2.5 hours, 14 to 15.4 degrees is over the 22.5 hours they were on the surface when they landed the taking off. So by the time they get out, it might be 14.1 or 14.2 degrees on it, like that. That shadow length on an 8-foot flag would be probably 40 feet long. That's above 40 degree angle on it. Like if they're saying it's off by 30 degrees, then it's at 45 degrees. And that's pretty much what you're looking at in that photograph. That's the same with the shadow length of the limb, is about the same.
So that's where you come back to the article when he says it's 30 degrees off. He's correct.
Easily correct.
Yeah, because if those angles are shown there, and that's pretty accurate in terms of how it would look, it should be about 15 degrees, and it's around 45 degrees, hence the 30 degree difference. I think he spotted something quite important here.
Absolutely. I'm just skipping through the different photographs from the length of stay that they were there. The shadow length on the flag virtually doesn't change. I'll set this one out as an example because this is one just before they lifted off. Of course, any of the ones shot from the window out, because they only went onto the surface once and then came back in the machine. That's before they took off.
That's right.
All
Yeah.
those shots are there, but this is one of the last ones that they had out there. Almost the same image, just in black and white. When they're running around beside the flag and that, I don't see anything to compare the length of the shadow with, because it's missing half the time.
The camera is tilted slightly. You can tell that by the angle of the flagpole itself, but it doesn't alter the shadow angle.
No.
We should be able to say about 45 degrees, something like that.
That's about 45 degrees that you're looking at there. It's only supposed to be 15 degrees, so if he says it's off by 30%, he's done the math on it.
Yeah, and he's right, because you can see the visual image. So come on, you guys out there, prove us wrong. Prove the Russian scientists wrong. Show how Apollo is faked. That's what's applying here. We're told one thing by NASA. They landed when the sun angle was 15 degrees above the horizon, and we see photographs with it at 45 degrees. What's going on? Why is it so different? Obviously, the continuity goals weren't up that day.
I found one with the shadow visible shot from the ground there. And you can see the rock that's sitting beside it on the ones off the thing are the same as the ones sitting on the ground. So it hasn't changed.
That is certainly not 15 degrees.
No, the artificial lighting would have been very static. It wouldn't have moved.
No, I wouldn't. No.
And on top of that, you can see the hot spot in that as well.
It's probably done on a miniature set. Quite easy to do if you've got all the facilities of Lookout Mountain Laboratory at your hand. Anybody not know what Lookout Mountain Laboratory was doing around this time? Producing films for the US Air Force. The US Air Force were in charge of Apollo at that time.
I'd still bet it's all Flagstaff, and that's the models are models, but they're full-size models. They're just mock-ups.
Yeah, no, it could well be. I say the final production of the photographs and the films would have been done at Lookout Mountain Laboratories, but the actual shooting of them could be done at Flagstaff, could have been done anywhere.
Well, it's interesting they had that gantry crane. You could have hung a full limb on that crane and had it do anything you wanted to do, because they had a whole little miniature substation beside it. Had its own power supply, had everything in there for the lights, the cameras, you name it. And not only that, but when we look at the Gemini simulators that were all hung from a ceiling in a massive warehouse. I mean, you're telling me that wouldn't be able to hold a flimsy little limb full with equipment and retros and engines? I mean, the whole meal deal. And then that's all you have to do is just put your layout down on the bottom. I mean, look at all those molds, the flat ones I'm talking about. They're just clipped together on the floor.
Yeah.
And all you just push them all into position underneath that, and you have yourself a complete moon set. Beautiful. And I think that's what happened in that video that Raza sent, is the lighting is coming from the top. So the lighting is up on top of that gantry system, shooting down on top of that retro. That's where I think it's coming from. And because the way they were filming it, it's overexposed. That's why it looks like a zero like that. It's overexposed. But when I bring the shadow down, now you can see it.
It's very well done for spotting that, because it certainly looks like a numeral 0. And because we assume that the thing next to it is the numeral 1, which may well be another part of the shadow off the maneuvering rockets, I think it's very well spotted.
And then the reflection in the windows where those lights were just, they're flight suits.
They could have been on the same set as when they were shooting the 10 Commandments, you know.
Oh, well, yeah, but the 10 Commandments wasn't filmed in the 50s. Oh, well, yeah, it could be.
Perhaps they just took the set. Number 10, that'll do. Yeah, it's interesting, that chart of the sun angles, EVA sorted by sun angle at EVA start, and Apollo 11 comes in at 14 to 15.4 degrees above the horizon. That's what we said.
Yes, that's from landing till takeoff.
Yeah.
Over the 22 and a half hours they're on the surface, so-called.
That's right.
Pretend surface.
That would be a good point to make. So what was this article about? Titled, "On the Question of the Mathematical Analysis and the Materials of the Lunar Expeditions, Dr. Kolobkov had detailed the significant 30% inexplicable reduction in the shadow lengths he had found in the photographs taken during the Apollo 11 EVA. However, according to B, it was the photogrammetric map supplied by NASA's affiliates at the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal that was at the root of the problem. Now, who do we know that works for that site? Phil Plait? Some of the other guys?
Yeah, Massimo's in on there as well. Those boys, right?
Those maps don't show any angle above the horizon. They just show the direction in which the photograph was taken.
The direction, that's all you see here.
Yeah. You've got the TV camera top left. You've got a crater. You've got all the Apollo 11 magazine numbers and where they were taken from. But it doesn't show anything to do with angle above the horizon.
That's why I provided that angle above the horizon off the journal site, and then you can physically compare them against the photographs.
It's the LRRR.
That's the laser reflector.
Lunar retroreflector.
Yes. And that's the one, if it was there, would be completely covered in dust.
Of course it would.
As soon as the photoelectric charge gets off the fine lunar dust that would be there, it would just cover it over and it wouldn't reflect anything.
So those little mirrors would have been covered right to the top in dust by now after 55 years. But the one fella calculated how much dust should be on those. They're filled. They're filled right up. So you're not going to get any return, nothing.
They were designed so that they would reflect back at the same angle that they were receiving the light from. So if you shot a laser, it would go back to the same spot. Where you're shooting a laser from, you'd be probably 35 or 40 miles away in the time it takes it to bounce it back. You see all these people and they're receiving it right beside the laser that they're sending it at and saying, oh, we got a return, right? Well, that's not where it's going to return from because the Earth is moving.
Yeah, and in 22 hours, which is the time they spent on the lunar surface, dear old Armstrong and Aldrin, the Earth would rotate virtually one complete revolution.
Wherever you set the station up, you'd have to wait for it to come back around again.
Yeah, you would.
Where you set the laser up and where you're going to receive the signal from are going to be miles apart, just in the couple of seconds it takes to bounce back, 2.2 seconds to the return.
He took this information right from the horse's mouth, right from the Lunar Surface Journal, and here it is. I just went over there just to have a look at it. Oh, look at the graphs and everything that are here. I mean, this is great stuff here that he's pulled off of the site. I mean, they've basically shot themselves in the foot.
They're posting their own mistakes, and they always have and always will be because they don't know that they're mistakes.
Quite a lot of this hourless article is taken up with the Russian reviewers of the article arguing that it didn't make sense or trying to defend Apollo. Interesting.
Boy, did they ever update the journal site.
That's where he said new information, and so this is where it came from.
This is just one of the pages out of it. These are all the pages that they've now added. This is just this one, pan 1 at the foot of the ladder. All of this detail's in there. Here's the photo numbers here to go with them.
Yeah.
This is his full panoramic when he first stepped off and did his first stuff just shooting around. And then there's the second panorama around when he's doing it. And I like how they just beautifully put this stuff in. I mean,
look at that.
10-year-old kid could put that together on his iPhone in a couple of seconds, right?
Yeah, it's not difficult.
And then here's pan 3 when he's standing off there. And you realize with all these photographs, they didn't have time to do anything else.
Quite a lot of photographs taken here, especially the panoramas. They didn't expect people 50 years later to be examining it in the detail that we can now do it with the electronic equipment that we've got. And so they made mistakes. The mistakes are now being identified and being questioned. And if the mistakes don't add up, which they don't appear to do in terms of shadow angles, we're quite right to question it. Now, if somebody thinks that Apollo was real, and therefore anybody questioning it must be a conspiracy theorist and complete fruitcake, that is what applies to them because they're not willing to examine it in sufficient detail with sufficiently unemotional view of the whole thing. They're examining it with a view of those who claim Apollo was real. So if you claim Apollo is real, you have to explain how these anomalies have occurred. And if you can't explain how the anomalies have occurred, i.e. the shadow angles, the position of the flag relative to the landing, if you can't explain any of that, realistically, you would have to say that Apollo was faked here on Earth under controlled conditions, because that's what we're looking at, controlled conditions. Fakery, fraud, fiction. Apollo was fiction. But if you don't want to admit that because your whole emotional view of Apollo is it was real and these brave men went to the moon in peace for all mankind, the title of a book, For All Mankind. So many people have written books about it, therefore they have to agree with each other. Now, there are people like us, and there are many more people like us around than you think, guys, many more people who are willing to take on board some of the things that we have examined, some of the things that we've discussed, and call it out. If you don't agree with us, then come on here and discuss it.
Yeah, come on here and discuss it, but they won't, right? They won't come on here. I can't show my face. I can't do this. I can't. It's just an excuse, one after the other.
Because they all work for NASA, and they'd be called out by their bosses. Oh, they'd be in serious trouble if they tried it.
I'd just like to show you a little something. When they update files, and here that other map takes you to the various photographs here. So on this one, it says, or remapped with Huygens. So there's the image, remapped with Huygens. Here's so-called the original. I'll open that in a new window. It's been now deleted, the original photograph. And we'll take a look at the other one, which is only 0.2 megabytes. This is a little tiny picture of it. And then you see the 1.1 megabyte when you click on it. That's the original image that was on it. And if you have the other one that's the smaller JPEG, which is only 2.2 megabytes, you get just a little image of it. And then it's the remapped one, which is 1.4 megabyte that's been remapped. That's the larger photograph. But the original one has been removed. It's 404 error.
There it is, error 404, not found.
Yeah. So when they don't want you to see something, they've been going through these. You imagine the team and the amount of money they're spending 50 years after an event to keep doing this, to keep updating it.
58, 51. But when it's been remapped by Huygens, there it comes back again.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's something missing.
All I get here is for Apollo 16 is the remapped images can be used to create stereo views by using other methods for those interested in subject Apollo photography. It's a panoramic stitching program, Huygens. It's the name of a program. This is where they messing around with all the images on this page right here. Well, that's back to the same thing, except it's got a different title. The new camera station map with improved locations. Why do they have improved locations? Why aren't the original locations where they claim they landed have to be improved?
Or it's like when they go and they make new improved cinnamon toast bread or, something like that. And then the next week they change the recipe to new and improved. And instead of using white flour, they use a combination of wheat and everything else. Now it's not the same. Doesn't taste anything the same. Well, this is what they're doing in here, new and improved. And now when you click on it, it gets error 404.
But yes, that Aldous article, I mean, when they say they're off by 30 degrees, it's 30 degrees is quite obvious to see.
Yeah, it is. It is. In fact, it's a very good observation. It's backed up with a lot of mathematics, backed up with a lot of information.
Well, it's all based on NASA's documents and photographs.
Yeah, it all comes from NASA's photographs. The Lunar Surface Journal desperately trying to find reasons why it's not true. So everybody gets accused of being a conspiracy theorist, and that obviously is the answer. If you're a conspiracy theorist, you can't be saying anything correct, except that the CIA invented the term when people started questioning the JFK assassination records.
They try to discredit people. They can't argue the facts because they don't have the facts. So they simply discredit somebody, even if they have to kill them.
Well, they've had to do that a few times.
The U.S. has got a pretty good track record of doing that, right?
Oh, yeah. Goes back to Alan Dulles, doesn't it, when he took over CIA, turned it into a weapon, against foreign countries. And then when John Kennedy tried to remove Ellen Dulles, he got himself shot. I'm not saying there's a connection because I can't prove it, but the information appears to indicate that. Dangerous people, dangerous times. But if other information becomes available and it contradicts what they say, which has happened quite frequently recently, it starts to question whether these guys know what they're talking about. And I don't think they do. We shall see. We shall see. We shall see. We shall see.